Playing the speedrun mode over and over again, seeing what fast times I can get, finding new techniques to improve my speed and the best way to go about enemy encounters is just so fun. The amount of freedom you have in spite of your limited moveset is nuts, and the physics are fucking perfect. I've been really liking this game and I can't wait to see what the finished product's like. I made that video approximately 1 year ago, and the game finally released at the beginning of November. Since then I've beaten the game like what, 3, 4, 5 times? Oops. And in spite of the fact that this year has been great for games, I can confidently say that Sanabi is my game of the year. Oftentimes when I see a new side-scrolling indie game, it's seemingly always something derivative of other games, be it big name games like Sonic or Metroid, or even other indie games like Super Meat Boy. Not to mention a lot of those games just kind of blend together in my head. Their visuals being styled after older games was pretty cool, especially early on when Shovel Knight did it, but it's kind of lost its novelty since. One of the few pixel graphics indie games that I think managed to stick out from the rest was Katana Zero. The movement of everything was animated so smoothly and the levels were so vibrant and detailed that it felt less like they were emulating the style of those older games and more so evolving it for a modern era. Add to that gameplay that's almost wholly unique with awesome mechanics and a creative use of its own story elements, and you end up with one of the most unique indie games out there. It's games like these that really catch my interest, and none have ever gotten me as invested from a single humble trailer as Sanabi did. I first saw the game sometime in October last year where they first dropped the demo for it on Steam Next Fest, and I was hooked from the start, repeatedly playing the speedrun mode for it, and you bet your ass I bought this game the very day it entered early access. Playing every updated build they dropped was really awesome. But that's enough talking around the bush. Let me explain to you exactly what it is that makes this game so good. Though I want to clarify that I won't be discussing or showing anything past chapter 3 until I get to the spoiler section later, because the game is just really that awesome. Fundamentally, Sanabi is about its movement. You play as a retired soldier named the General, who has a giant chain arm that lets him grapple onto almost any surface, kind of like in Bionic Commando. And this is what makes up the core of practically the entire game. At the start of the game your moveset is simple, but effective. You can swing yourself from surface to surface whilst building up momentum, which you can then add onto with a little dash that you can do while grappled, which is how you traverse almost all of the different environments. It's also how you fight enemies. Once they're within your range, the reticle will turn from blue to red and you can instantly zip over to them and kill them. And lastly, if you ever get hit, you have a small window which you can then use to dash into any direction. That's all there is to it. The game is the definition of easy to learn and hard to master. Each move can be used to make traversal faster and is insanely satisfying to pull off. There are so many maneuvers you can do that let you skip entire chunks at every stage. Every chapter introduces a new mechanic which further expands your range of options. Chapter 2 gives you the ability to instantly zip to any surface you've grappled onto. Chapter 3 has these robots that you can temporarily control to solve puzzles and so on. It never lingers on any gimmick for longer than it needs to, frequently spicing things up to keep you interested. One of my favorite parts of the game is this section in chapter 1 where you're being chased by a giant mechanical worm. This essentially functions as a filter for if you've probably understood how to play the game, and it is immensely fun. And despite constantly varying things up, they never drop the core mechanics of the chain arm. The farthest it ever gets away from it is during the end of chapter 3, where you have to maneuver a car by pulling yourself onto nearby pieces of debris to get out of danger. This is easily my least favorite part of the game, but it doesn't even last remotely long enough to become irritating. The physics are perfect and every death feels actively deserved, since the amount of control you have over the General is fast, snappy, and really fun like the best 2D action games are. In terms of speedrunability, it also adds a whole other layer of strategy. And remember that damage boost dashing ability I mentioned earlier? This is a genius mechanic. See, on any difficulty outside of the one you unlock after beating the game, which has you dying in one hit, you have 4 hit points. On easy you take no damage whatsoever, but on normal and veteran you can heal yourself by not being hit again for a while, though the amount changes depending on difficulty. Say you have full health. You can risk letting yourself take damage and boost across a damage barrier in order to skip a large portion of a room, or you can allow yourself to be hit by an enemy projectile to give yourself extra height to reach an area above you, skipping 2 entire combat encounters. All at the expense of leaving you vulnerable until you either heal up or find a checkpoint. The level design heavily encourages this kind of experimentation of its mechanics, and it's this which really lets this game stand out. When you look at other really speedrunnable side-scrollers like the earlier mentioned Katana Zero, there's always set objectives. Sure, you can get different weapons across the map and use them in different ways, but it's almost solely about optimizing movement and making it to the end in the same way each time. Kill all enemies and progress onwards. And while that is a very valid way of designing a speed game, Sanabi rewards outside of the box thinking. You can skip a majority of the enemy encounters in this game by simply using your moveset to your advantage and combining it with the level design. Even when a jump seems impossible outside of the quote-unquote intended path, the next grabbable ledge will always be just in reach enough that a clever maneuver will get you across. It is expertly designed. So what do you actually do in this game? As mentioned before, you play as a retired soldier, and the game starts with him playing with his daughter, who's just the sweetest little thing. Until... yeah, if that's not enough motivation to go after the perpetrators behind this, then I don't know what is. After going on a rampage, the general finds out that the person responsible for the bombing is an individual called Sanabi, who is currently hiding out in a place called Mago City, which is run by a dystopian supercorporation called the Mago Group. Once you arrive there, however, it turns out that the inhabitants of the city have all seemingly disappeared overnight. Millions of people gone, just like that. While there you meet the general's contact, a hacker named Mari, and from then on the game is about getting to the top of Mago Tower, killing Sanabi and stopping the big explosion. Because yes, this city is set to blow itself up. On the surface the story is a simple one about revenge, but it goes into some extremely well written emotional places. A common complaint I've seen about the earlier chapters of this game is that Mari can be pretty annoying. Truth be told, in the early access builds, I thought so too. A lot of her dialogue in the first half of the game includes cringy referential humor and lines like, "Wombo combo, Happy Feet would be proud," but I can confidently say that there's a very good reason for it. Once you get into the latter half of the game, it becomes pretty evident that Mari herself is hiding some things, and so her behavior early on serves as a wonderful and honestly pretty necessary contrast, as her change in behavior as the game progresses instantly tips you off to the fact that something is wrong. I've also seen a lot of people complain that the game has too much dialogue and that the frequent cutscenes break the pace, which I frankly find to be a silly complaint. The story makes up half the game and is extremely well written in spite of how short it is, and even if you don't care about it, there's nothing stopping you from just skipping all the cutscenes. The option is right there. The game is separated into 5 chapters, all of which consist of a series of longer stages with several set pieces including a boss or two. Aside from just expanding on your moves every chapter, they also introduce a specific mechanic exclusive to itself. Chapter 1 features the aforementioned worm chase. Chapter 2 has a focus on moving platforms and features enemies that can only be defeated by launching them into death barriers. Chapter 3 has a giant eye that kills you if you let it see you for too long, and so on. The bosses are also extremely cool, as all of them serve as a test of how well you've mastered all the mechanics that the game has thrown at you at this point. I especially like the Chapter 3 boss, as it is largely a really challenging series of small platforming challenges which require precise navigation. All of this is accompanied by an absolutely gorgeous presentation. I mean seriously, every chapter takes place on a different layer of Mago City, and they all have completely different color palettes that make them stand out from one another. The music does a fantastic job of accompanying every layer, and giving them a certain flair as well. The theme, which you can hear on the title screen, is also a constant leitmotif throughout the game, and is used in an incredibly well-balanced way, all throughout the game. From the heavy beats present in Chapter 1 to the droning wailing in Chapter 3, it's always present in some form, and it really helps in making each chapter feel like a different part of the same place, rather than several disconnected areas, in spite of the visual differences between them. And then there's the thing that I pushed this video back for to begin with. See, throughout all of the early access builds, there was always a speedrun mode available, which would task you with playing through large chunks of Chapters 1 and 2 back to back as fast as possible. It was extremely fun and addicting. Once the game left early access though, this mode wasn't included and would instead be added in post. As of me writing this, it just got released, and yeah, I already grinded my total time down to a sub 50 minutes. Essentially, the mode is separated into 5 stages, all being supercuts of the main chapters, with a lot of the major set pieces, such as the worm chase or the stick and observer hunt, cut for the sake of making it a smooth, purely skill-based affair. I'm having a blast trying to find new ways to optimize my movement and new paths in order to skip chunks of any given area. This game is just an absolute joy to speedrun, even if you don't like speedrunning to begin with. In this section, I'm going to be talking about spoilers for the game, which is to say that anything that happens in Chapter 4 and 5 will be discussed here. I won't be long, but it's just some general thoughts that I have, so if you don't want to see this, skip to the next segment. I genuinely think that this game's plot is extremely clever. Ultimately, the story is pretty simple, but I also think that those kinds of stories are the ones that leave the biggest impact. The idea that it's about the journey and not the destination has been done to death before, but something about how Sanabi pulls it off really makes it stand out in my eyes. The fact that Sanabi, as in the song, is a constant leitmotif throughout the game is genius. As oftentimes when you do get the chance to hear that leitmotif, it's right at the end of a track and the scenes are just too short for you to be able to get to the part where it kicks in. This is especially noticeable in Mari's theme. Furthermore, the idea of not having to make it to the end itself stretches throughout major parts of the story. It's why we never see what happens after the final conversation between the general and Mari, and why there's no final boss. It's also encapsulated by the entirety of chapter 5, which is a supercut of everything you've gone through throughout the first 4 chapters. The general could have just let himself be dropped off at the top of Mago Tower and go straight to Mari, but there wouldn't have been a point in that, because in the end, making it to the end isn't what's important, it's how we get there that is. And on another note, holy shit, the boss fight with General Song is excellent. It really makes you think about all the moves you have at your disposal. You think you figured her out, and then she pulls out something else. It's such a fun battle, and especially on Legend difficulty, which kills you in one hit, it was an absolute joy to master that fight. So ultimately, it's pretty clear that I think everybody should play this game, and thankfully it's super cheap. The game goes for $12 regularly, 10 on sale, and they already announced that 2 free DLCs are on the way and supposed to release in early 2024. The game is on both PC and Switch and runs on PCs and laptops made in 2010. And whilst I would never recommend anybody play this game with a controller over keyboard and mouse, I gave the controller option a try, and honestly, you can definitely get used to it. It might just take you some more time than usual. What I find most impressive about this game is that it was developed by a small Korean indie studio named Wonder Potion, and as far as I can tell, this is their first real project. And that is insane to me. How often do you come across a small team that on their first go already pumps out a project of such pristine quality? Korean games in general have kind of been a really nice surprise for me as of recently. Hell, I loved Library of Ruina so much that I ended up playing Limbus Company. And if you know me, you might know that I despise gacha games. I've genuinely come to believe that places like Korea and China deserve much more respect in the modern games industry than they currently receive. There has come to be a sort of stigma around them that everything that comes out of those regions is either shovelware or predatory MOBA. I think that is an incredibly close-minded way of looking at these things. Ultimately, anyone from anywhere has the tools necessary to make something worth experiencing, be they Korean, Hungarian, or even not normal. To me, the indie market has come to feel like it's almost entirely dominated by the Western world, and sometimes Japan as well. And whilst they can be good, I feel like they've become a bit homogenized, always trying to fill into one mold or another. So you know what? I've decided to be as open-minded as I can be when it comes to these kinds of things from now on. Next Korean game I'm recommended, I'll play without any prejudice, no matter what. Mistakes have been made.